Okay. How is all this affecting the grains, Rich? I mean, the crude oil is usually pretty much in tandem with the grains.
So one thing we talked about, one thing that actually Brian spoke there, and a couple quotes he mentioned kind of hit home. The idea here is he likes the idea of buying crude, but just doesn't want to. And the second thing you noted was, you know what, the trend is one thing you just can't stand in front of, which in the case of crude is down. One thing we've been watching here for several months, and if you look at this chart, this is a chart comparing unleaded gas, or RBOB, to ethanol prices. And if you look at this in this pre-February time frame, in fact, if you go back a full year and whatnot, these guys are very well correlated. Ethanol prices are very well correlated to unleaded gas and crude. We did have a period of time for a couple months where they basically diverged from each other. Even though unleaded gas was rallying hard, ethanol was breaking hard. And interesting to see that we kind of got these guys kind of fixed up a little bit going back to each other, but the last week or two has been pretty rough here for ethanol. And why do we watch this so closely? And here's this correlation between corn and ethanol. And look at these nice down lows and nice trying rebounds. So in other words, the point is the correlation between corn and ethanol itself is back on, and it's something that we cannot ignore here. So this outside market, event-driven stuff is directly impacting us in the grains, and it also directly impacts in a secondary way meats as well. So we're starting out the grain focus by mentioning and making this very direct correlation, because roughly a third, in fact now it's a little more than a third, of all corn goes to ethanol production. The value of that corn that goes to ethanol that's returned back to corn varies very directly with what's going on with ethanol prices. So let's just kind of keep that in mind. So right now the outside market influence is bearish on grains, and obviously we know that from the price impact how it's been last few days. In terms of USDA's changes they made last week, their very first guess at ending stocks here and a full balance sheet number. So roughly numbers about the same as far as the old crop, between old crop corn and new crop corn right here. Allendale's numbers plugging in this 1.6 right now. So we're actually looking for numbers a little higher than what USDA has plugged in. However, let's also mention this other issue which is going on right now, and that's on the yield end. If you look at yields, from the study we mentioned a couple weeks ago, and we're going to show a chart on this just a little bit ago. We mentioned that this corn crop has been planted ahead of normal, far ahead of normal, by a full 11 to 12 days ahead of normal is what we're at right now. That chart we showed there, if you actually correlate, and we'll show this on the chart, shows about 180 bushels per acre yield potential. And we're not saying that we're going to have 180 corn yield, so make sure that you understand very clearly. We're not saying 180, but we're saying that based on the way this crop has started, we've got the potential for a rip-roaring crop. And if you have that, we've got an ending stock number, 2.1 billion bushel, and anything beyond 1.9 is just considered flat-out bearish, so keep that in mind here. As far as USDA's report on the beans, we don't need to go over this really too much in depth. 180 for old crop, going up to 600 or 366. Allendale, we got no problem with that. We're at over 300. This is still bearish no matter how you cut it for beans. As far as out this week for planting pace, things like that, they're talking corn, 89% is the guess. For beans, they're talking 43% planted. And that is ahead of normal, but it's not too far ahead of normal like the corn was. This is not going to be a record on the beans here. So 43% is the guess for this afternoon's planting report. I mentioned we're going to go back and show this whole kind of early planting means big yields for corn chart. Here's what that chart was again. And again, just a reminder, if we plant early, and these are a number of days we're ahead of normal, look at what happens to yield. In all these cases here, 14 of those 15 years, we have higher than trend yield. Very strong correlation. And look at this corn. Up 11 days ahead of normal, that correlates to over a 10% jump over trend yield. So big deal for corn. Let's look at the same one for beans. It's kind of scattered. It's nowhere near as nice and pretty. So early planting for beans does not mean a direct correlation with big yields. So kind of keep that one in mind here as we go throughout the next few days. As far as update on soil moisture, one thing I don't like about this chart is this is actually up through Saturday, May 8th. So this is actually over a week old. I don't like that in general because it doesn't show those rains we had last week. But as of that time, there was no real concerns as far as moisture. You can add, maybe it's going to have a little light green in some of these areas here if that were current. And as far as other threats, next week's weather, seeing above normal temps and normal, maybe a little above normal for the western Corn Belt for precip. So the main point we're going to lay out as far as the grains right now is we've got bearish outside market influence. As far as corn, realistically, the current numbers are not bearish, but the current yield potential, which is the second thing that's just on the market's mind right now, is a little bearish here for corn. As far as Allendale's position, we still like the idea that based on our ending stock projections, this market could get down to 320, 325 at fall, but realistically, we still think you'll have chances at $4 and above for selling this market at a little higher. And we're going to have to keep on top of this weather issue very, very carefully as the weeks go by. As we said, we have 180 bushel potential right now for corn. Over on the bean end, we're being very clear as far as soybeans. We do think this market is maybe has a chance here and there at 950 again above. But bottom line, we don't see any problems with saying this market will get down to these eighths easy on that node contract.